Hello, I'm delighted to be joined by Ofer Cassif, who is a very courageous Israeli politician, a member of Hadash party, which is a left-wing party which brings together both Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel. Now, Ofer has, many of you may have seen, been in the headlines because he has supported the case made by South Africa, which has filed a case alleging genocide in the International Court of Justice. Ofer, firstly, a huge honor to be joined by you.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the compliments.
More than deserved. Can you just tell me, why did you decide to back South Africa's case?
Well, there are two main reasons. First of all, I think that what's going on in Gaza should be investigated. I don't want to say categorically that there is a genocide goes on in Gaza. But I do want to say that what's going on there should be investigated. Unfortunately, for more than 3 months there now, Israel has been, launching a terrible assault on Gaza, including the missing people. I'm afraid that there are already around 30,000 dead in Gaza. More than 70% are innocent civilians, mainly children and women. We are talking now about apparently 10,000 children who were killed. Children, not minors, but children. We are talking about a total destruction of Gaza Strip. More than 70% of the buildings are either totally destroyed or cannot be lived in. The United Nations that just published a couple of days ago that the Gaza Strip as a whole is on the brink of being a place that people cannot live there. So apparently, it seems that some crimes are or have been done there. And so that should be investigated. And my signature is to investigate. Israel, as part of the Convention Against Genocide, is not above the law. It's not above the international law. And in that sense, the government should be investigated. And this petition, by the way, and I will, if I have the time, I'll elaborate on that later. The petition, in my view, is not anti-Israeli. It's not against Israel. It is against the government of Israel. But because the government of Israel is the enemy of Israel, it is eventually for the interest of Israelis as well to sign this petition. The second thing is that the ICJ, as opposed to the ICC, cannot prosecute any individual, either politician or military person or something like that. The ICJ has the authority to issue decrees or decisions, for instance, and that's the most important thing in my view, by signing and by of the appeal itself, that the ICJ has the authority to decide that the war, the assault on Gaza should be stopped immediately. I support that, first and foremost, in order to save lives, not only of Palestinians, of course, mainly of Palestinians as far as the death toll is concerned, but I want to save the Israeli hostages. The government hasn't been doing anything to save the hostages. There's a huge negligence, a criminal negligence by the government on the eve of the massacre, the totally condemnable, sick criminal carnage done by Hamas, which we totally condemn. And I expect any human being, mainly the supporters of Palestinian liberation, to condemn Hamas for this massacre. But as I began to say, the government neglected the south of Israel for many years and allowed the massacre to take place. And many people in Israel, including many of the families of the victims of the massacre in Israel and the hostages, say the same. I have to say that I'm in touch on a daily basis with some of the families of the victims, including the hostages. Some of them, of course, not all of them, but some of them totally support my and my friends, my colleagues' political views and stance. So to get back to your question, and the signature is to express my will for ending the war and saving lives. And by the way, not only of Palestinians and the hostages, and again, because the government doesn't do anything to save the hostages, because they are dying there. They are dying there because they have no treatment. Many of them are old, sick, and they don't get, they are assaulted by Hamas. They are under the bombarding of Israel as well. There are illnesses there, etc., etc. But the government doesn't agree to do whatever they can to release them immediately. And we all say all for all. That means prisoners exchange. But if hypothetically the ICJ issues a decision that forces Israel, hypothetically, to end the war, so then the chances of releasing the hostages are going to get greater. And I also don't want Israeli soldiers to be killed. Israeli soldiers have been killed on a daily basis, but not for the security of Israel. This is a sham. This is a brainwash by the government. They are sacrificed by Netanyahu and his thugs, especially the more bigots ones, on the altar of their own survival, of the government's survival. That's a terrible crime against Israel. I want it to be stopped. And if a decision by the ICJ stops it, I've done my share.
What's been the response from the Israeli government, supporters of, for example, Likud, the coalition government, politicians, commentators on the right, pro-war commentators? What sort of response have you had?
Response to my signature, you mean? I didn't hear.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Sorry. First of all, as far as the public discourse in general is concerned, the social network, etc., I do have some support, and I must use this opportunity to express my gratitude for those who support me, Palestinians and Jews, Israelis, and Arabs as well. But of course, it seems that the dominant or the hegemonic discourse is very hostile, not to say violent. And by the way, under the auspices of this fascist government. And the prime minister, who has been supporting violence against his own, objectors, not only now, throughout the years, especially since this government was formed 1 year ago. But as far as the parliament is concerned, I'm very concerned about their own concern. I'm concerned about that. According to the Israeli law, a law that was enacted in 2016 and we opposed to, if 70 members of the Knesset out of 120, and 10 of whom must be from the opposition, sign a petition to expel a member of the Knesset, so there must be a discussion at first and foremost in the Knesset committee. If 70% of the members of the Knesset committee votes for the motion to expel or impeach, if you like, a member of the Knesset, then it goes back to the assembly, and there's a vote. And if 90 out of the 120 of the members of the Knesset vote for this impeachment or expulsion, so the member of the Knesset is expelled. And I mean, not on the spot. It takes years to 2 weeks before, so to use it to appeal to the Supreme Court, etc. So the first stage already succeeded because they collected yesterday eve more than 70 signatures. Now I must say, the guy that the member of the Knesset who began with this motion or initiated it is a fascist. So I'm not surprised. He's part of those who knows Avigdor Lieberman's party. It's called Israel Our Home. It's a fascist party. The leader of the party, Avigdor Lieberman, is also a violent person, politically speaking. I mean, in his, not only politically actually, but he was actually charged with hitting a minor, but that's not our issue now. He's politically violent, and so I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised either by those thugs from the so-called Jewish power and religious Zionism, or even worse than fascists. They resemble Oswald Mosley, if you like. If the Likud resembles Enoch Powell, they resemble Oswald Mosley. and so, in that sense, I'm not surprised, and I'm not even angry, because those are their views. I'm angry at the situation that allowed them to be in power. I am angry at those members of the Knesset of Yesh Atid, of Yair Lapid's party, who signed and who are supposedly democratic and liberals. And they signed in order to silence my opposition, because legally they know they have no basis. The attorney of the Knesset opposes the motion professionally. She says there's no reason, because the law says very explicitly the only 3 reasons that members of the Knesset can sign and expel another member of the Knesset who is, or she is elected, let's not forget, is either if that member of the Knesset supported terrorism, racism, or armed struggle against Israel. Neither of them is relevant to me and to my signature. Quite the contrary. Those who call for the elimination of Gaza, and there are ministers who say so explicitly, it was published. It's not my interpretation or imagination. Those who call for the elimination, extermination of Gaza, a minister who called to bomb Gaza with an atomic bomb, is too ignorant to understand that it may influence Israel too. The prime minister who referred to the people of Gaza as Amalek, which in the biblical sense, it's a people that deserve extermination. The president of the country signed a bomb. He signed a bomb, a farewell, a bon voyage greeting on a bomb that, statistically speaking, may have been killed children. Neither of them is going to be impeached. It's normal. That's the dominant public discourse. But someone like me, who opposes any kind of violence, of Hamas's and of Israel's, is going to perhaps being impeached. That shows to which bottom, to what abyss our society, unfortunately, and the Knesset deteriorated.
I mean, that's what I want to ask you. I mean, in South Africa's case, the second part deals with genocidal incitement intent. And
sure,
that itself is
in
illegal.
order to show intent.
Exactly. So in the 1948 Genocide Convention, makes it clear that's a criminal act. And signatories have a legal duty, to prosecute people who engage in genocidal intent. And I'm just interested in that atmosphere you just mentioned, from Benjamin Netanyahu, as you say, Amalek, where God orders the killing of all men, women, and children, and sucklings and livestock, to human animals. I mean, it's just every day you just get, that document's out of date now. That section's out of date because there's been so much incitement since. So just wondering, that does seem to be kind of spiraling out of control, that kind of genocidal rhetoric.
The rhetoric is unbearable, and it dominates the public discourse, and it dominates the government's discourse, because Netanyahu is totally dependent upon the most fanatic components of his government. Let's not forget that there are 3 serious charges against Netanyahu, and that he faces trial. In bribery, for instance, he knows for sure that the chances of going to prison, once and if he's convicted, are quite, great, are quite high. He would do anything to refrain from going to prison. So he's actually under the total power and control of the most fanatic and bigots in his government, like Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and others. By the way, they're even worse than them. And I don't know if the people know, but we are talking about people. Ben Gvir was convicted in Israeli, the court, in supporting terrorism. He until 1 year ago, and he had in his living room picture of Baruch Goldstein, who massacred 29 Palestinians while they were praying in El Khalil, El Hebron. And he had a picture and he referred to him as his hero. He didn't take it off the wall because he stopped agreeing with him, but because he knew that that will harm his chances to become a minister or to stay as a minister, but his views are still the same. He supports genocide quite clearly and is the national security minister, is in charge of the police. The police, by the way, has become a sort of a private militia of his. Smotrich is a Jewish supremacist who believes ideologically that the Jewish race, as it were, of course, is superior. He, not too many years ago, said very explicitly that he refuses that his wife is going to give birth or to be in a hospital, the same room with Arab women. So, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. They control the Israeli public discourse and they control Netanyahu. And that doesn't, by the way, say that Netanyahu bears no responsibility because he is under such a control. No, because eventually he chooses what to do. He chooses what to do. So it is for sure his guilt. So this is the atmosphere. This is the atmosphere. And I must say that I put some of the blame on the international community that allowed this situation to emerge. It could be stopped. And it could be stopped ages ago if the international community, and by the way, Britain is one of the main factors here, by forcing Israel and the Palestinians to end the occupation and reach a just peace. Everybody knows. Everybody who doesn't suffer from vacuum between one's ears knows that the only way to stop the bloodshed is by ending the occupation and the siege from Gaza. Definitely for now, we're talking about stopping the war. If we're talking about a tropical, situation, ending the war, exchange of prisoners, releasing the hostages, and reaching just peace without siege, without violence, without occupation. No other way. Unfortunately, the international community actually has been sacrificing the Palestinians and the Israelis together. The international community has been sacrificing. It doesn't care at all to the lives, about the lives neither of Palestinians nor of Israelis. That's a huge shame on the international community and mainly the United States.
I mean, just finally on that, I mean, I guess in terms of hope, I suppose, or something practical, what would your plea be to those in states like Britain or the United States? I mean, I think it's very interesting. There's a new younger Jewish left in the United States, which is leading many of the struggles at the moment in support of peace and in solidarity with Palestinians. But also in terms of the future, in terms of Israel, because you are the encapsulation of this great history of Jewish humanism, social justice, for which there wouldn't be I say this a lot, but it's true. There wouldn't be a left on a global scale without the contribution of that Jewish tradition.
Absolutely. In my view, I'm a socialist, and I'm a Marxist. And that's my main idea, self-identification. But I'm not alienated to Judaism, not in the religious sense. I'm totally atheistic. But I am Jewish, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I am not alienated. In my view, the heritage of the prophets is mainly be a dissident. I mean, if we look at Jeremiah, for instance, Isaiah, Amos, and others, they actually were prophets against the ruler. They paid huge price. They stood against the kings once the kings behaved in an unjust manner. I think that in that sense, the real heritage and legacy of early Judaism is justice, is equality. Of course, I have my own criticism of other components of Judaism because there are terrible malicious components as well. I'm not idealizing any kind of religion, neither Judaism nor others. Each and every religious, religion has its own positive and negative ingredients, so to speak. But the basis of Judaism, in my view, of the prophets, the message of the prophets is to seek justice. And I'm afraid that the Judaism, that that Jewish Power Party or religious Zionism party and others as individuals and other groups, the kind of Judaism they endorse and they follow is a deformed one. Mm. It is a twisted one. Mm. So my struggle, personally speaking, alongside my struggle for, of course, justice, is also to, save, as it were, the Judaism from the claws of those who deform it. And by the way, I must say, this is another thing which is very important for me. My signature, for instance, with which we are dealing mainly, is not against Israel, is against the government of Israel. It's because the government of Israel is against Israel and against the Israelis. I consider myself to be fighting for justice, but justice is for all, is also for Israelis. And in contrast to many who believe that there is a kind of zero-sum game between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the Arabs and the Jews in the land, as if one side wins, the other loses, and vice versa, as opposed to that, I believe that it's either a win-win situation or a lose-lose situation. Either both peoples win, that means peace, security, prosperity, liberation, democracy, justice, or both peoples lose, go to hell if you like. Those are the two alternatives. And because of that, it's also the interest of the international community, because this war, if it goes on, if it doesn't stop, everybody knows that it's not going to stop there between Israel and Hamas, or Israel against Gaza. It's going to spread. It already began to spread to the north. A war with Hezbollah going to be, the death toll is going to be much worse than that the Palestinians especially have been suffering from in the last 3 months, and of course Israel too. It's the worst massacre that the Israelis have been suffering ever since Israel was established. It's going to be much worse. We are talking of thousands, tens of thousands of Israelis, Lebanese, Palestinians who may be killed, and I'm not talking about the destruction, etc. If a full-fledged war is going to begin in the north. But if the international community doesn't stop that, it will happen. And then Iran is going to get into the business, and then the United States and the EU. We are on the brink of a serious threat of a world war. So it's the interest of the international community, not only for justice, although for me it's the main thing, but it's also, so to speak, out of realpolitik. It's the interest of the international community to get involved and stop the war and lead the region to real peace. There's a chance, but we do need you. That's also the interest of Israel. It's very important for me to say, of Palestinians and of Israel as well. And I wish we get there soon, because the alternative is a total destruction on a global scale.
Ofer, it's been such a privilege, and you're quite correct. Throughout history, those who often stand up against horrible violence and injustice and oppression often vilified and attacked and ostracized and threatened at the time, but they end up being vindicated by history, and those who vilify and attack them often end up damned. And I think it's pretty obvious how this one's going to pan out. I don't really think it needs to be, you don't need to be a prophet to work out how this one evolves.
Look, I have to say, I'm not a prophet, but let's not forget that as opposed to many Israelis, Netanyahu is not a king.
Very good. Very good. Very good way to end, I think. It's a huge honor. Please, for everyone who's watching or listening to this, do share the video, get Ofer's message out. We need him heard very loud and clear. Do like as well, leave comments, subscribe. But Ofer, thank you so much. And you've, I think,
thank you. It was a pleasure
for a lot of people everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.